Welcome to Clinical Capsules from TRC Healthcare, your trusted source for practical, evidence-based updates. On this episode, clinical pharmacist Rachel Cole explores common myths and real-world challenges in hypothyroidism care. She discusses product switching, adherence tips for levothyroxine, and safety considerations for desiccated thyroid extract in an excerpt from our popular Pharmacy Essential Updates webinar series. This podcast offers continuing education credit for pharmacists and pharmacy technicians. Please log in to your pharmacist letter or pharmacy technician's letter account and look for the title of this podcast in the list of available CE courses. None of the speakers have anything to disclose. Catch new episodes of Clinical Capsules every second and fourth Tuesday, bringing concise, actionable insights from TRC experts straight to your ears. Let's dive in.
Our article says questions will come up about the safety of desiccated thyroid extract, or DTE, due to FDA's recent alert, and we'll talk about how this may affect patients and prescribers as we walk through a general overview of hypothyroidism. Before we dive in, let's briefly review thyroid hormone and its function, and what happens in hypothyroidism, which will help us better understand the concerns we'll touch on later. Thyroid hormones help regulate metabolism and growth and development, so they affect practically every organ in the body. Thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH, is secreted by the pituitary gland and stimulates the thyroid gland to make and release our thyroid hormones, T4 and T3. T4 is the main thyroid hormone that's secreted by the thyroid. But T4 actually does not have much activity on its own. Instead, it's converted into T3 throughout the body. And then that T3 that's either released from the thyroid or converted from T4 is actually the active hormone responsible for the physiological effects. And then the levels of T3 and T4 in the blood create a kind of feedback loop, and that regulates how much TSH is made. So it's really a cycle. So if a patient has hypothyroidism, their thyroid gland is underactive for one reason or another, and the patient won't make enough T3 and T4. And with this decrease in thyroid hormones, many of the body's functions slow down. So medications, such as levothyroxine, are used to help replace the body's thyroid hormones. Patients with hypothyroidism can experience symptoms such as fatigue, constipation, cramps, and dry skin. And many times, a thyroid-stimulating hormone, or TSH, level can be taken to help evaluate a patient's thyroid function. And that makes sense when you think about that feedback loop we just talked about. If a patient has high TSH levels, that means the body is sensing that there's too little thyroid hormone in the blood, and it's trying to make more. In general, once diagnosed with hypothyroidism, a patient will have their TSH level measured about 6 to 8 weeks after starting therapy, and then the dose of their medication can be adjusted based on those TSH levels. Once the med dose and TSH levels are stable, TSH can be checked again after about 6 months, and then just yearly thereafter. Now, when it comes to treating hypothyroidism, we definitely see levothyroxine used the most. It's synthetic T4, identical to the T4 made by our thyroid. And levothyroxine is then converted by the body to T3, the active hormone. Now, another treatment option is liothyronine, or synthetic T3. And then the desiccated thyroid extracts, brands like Armour Thyroid or NP Thyroid, come from dried thyroid glands of animals, typically pigs, and have a mix of T3 and T4, plus a mix of other substances secreted by the thyroid gland. And even though there are several options we can use for hypothyroidism, we can continue to think of levothyroxine as the drug of choice. And that's partly because it has the best evidence of efficacy, it's well tolerated, it has just once daily dosing because of its long half-life, and it's low cost. And the abundance of dosing options allowing a fine-tuning of thyroid management, while desiccated thyroid doesn't have this benefit. So we can continue to recommend levothyroxine first line, But one issue that sometimes comes up with levothyroxine is the question about whether it's okay to switch levothyroxine products. We know this might be necessary, especially if we end up with different levothyroxine brands in our pharmacy from what the patient is taking. Even though many brand and generic levothyroxine products are AB rated or considered equivalent by FDA, some experts still debate whether it's okay to switch. But despite these concerns, generally speaking, yes, it's okay to switch levothyroxine products. If there's a difference in absorption among bioequivalent products, it's likely very small. Of course, follow your state laws and pharmacy policies if a switch is necessary, and inform your patients about the switch, and put on a new generic auxiliary label if needed. And if there are concerns, you can let patients know that TSH levels can be checked about 6 to 8 weeks after a switch. Also, reassure patients that one product isn't better than another. So, another common question that comes up with levothyroxine is, does levothyroxine have to be taken on an empty stomach? This seems to be a myth that continues to lead to unnecessary confusion and hardship for patients, since levothyroxine does not necessarily need to be taken on an empty stomach. Now, taking levothyroxine on an empty stomach is ideal because we know that absorption is higher on an empty stomach. For example, taking it about 30 to 60 minutes before breakfast or 4 hours after the evening meal before bedtime are both good times to take levothyroxine. And related to this question is whether levothyroxine needs to be separated from other medications, such as calcium, iron, or multivitamins with minerals by 4 hours. We know levothyroxine can interact with a number of different OTCs or prescription meds that can bind to levothyroxine in the gut and reduce its absorption. But following these strict dosing recommendations are often not practical for all of our patients, especially if they may end up not taking it at all. The key is to remind patients that adherence and consistency is key with levothyroxine. And in most cases, this approach gives us a lot more flexibility. If patients can't handle taking levothyroxine on an empty stomach at all, then let them know that TSH can be monitored and the dose of levothyroxine can be adjusted based on that patient's usual routine. The same with interacting meds. Tell patients to separate the levothyroxine from the interacting med as close as they can to that 4 hours. But more importantly, keep that consistent interval between interacting medications. And if they change how they take levothyroxine or an interacting med, advise rechecking TSH about 6 to 8 weeks afterwards and adjusting the dose of levothyroxine if needed. Again, as long as patients are consistent, that levothyroxine dose can be adjusted. Another common question that comes up is desiccated thyroid, such as armor thyroid, or liothyronine, synthetic T3, better options than levothyroxine? The quick answer is no. Some patients swear they feel better on desiccated thyroid or when active T3 is added to levothyroxine. But explain that the amount of T3 in desiccated thyroid may be more than the body would normally make, and this could possibly lead to hyperthyroid effects, such as atrial fibrillation or osteoporosis. And DTE is listed on the Beers criteria due to concerns about cardiac effects. Naturally occurring physiological T3 to T4 ratio is about 1 to 13 micrograms, and this ratio is 1 to 4 micrograms in DTE. So the 1 to 4 ratio in the medication contains a higher amount of T3 per T4, about 3 times more T3 than the natural physiological ratio. Also discourage adding synthetic T3 liothyronine to levothyroxine, except in rare cases such as a thyroidectomy or radioiodine ablation. Caution that this combo might increase cardiovascular risk due to providing more T3 than the body would normally make. If patients want to try it, or if you see these meds combined, suggest using just a small amount of T3 in about a 1 to 13 or 1 to 20 ratio of liothyronine to levothyroxine. This smaller ratio might help prevent overtreatment and hyperthyroid effects. Now, FDA is calling for DTE manufacturers to seek approval since these products predate the modern FDA standards for drug approval. The concerns include the unreviewed safety, purity, and potency of these animal derived medications and possible quality and dosing issues. But the alert indicates FDA isn't taking immediate action, so patients have time to transition to an FDA approved med. Let's help put these concerns in perspective. Widespread adverse effects haven't been reported. DTE has a long history of clinical use, and patients do see benefit with these meds. More safety studies are needed, which are in the works per FDA, and the American Association of Clinical Endocrinology, or the AACE, reports that they support equitable access to safe and effective thyroid therapies. Now let's review one last common question, and that's should patients switch from desiccated thyroid extract to levothyroxine? Well, it depends on patient preferences and availability from manufacturers. It's important to acknowledge your patient's experiences and their preferences. Discuss potential cardiac and bone risk that we touched on earlier. Emphasize the importance of monitoring since some experts observe poor control of hypothyroidism with patients on DTE, possibly due to variation among lots. Support shared decision making with prescribers and inform patients of the uncertainty around possible DTE shortages due to FDA's enforcement actions. Use caution and monitor closely if patients switch from DTE to levothyroxine, since conversion formulas in the literature vary. Generally start with a dose equivalent to 75 to 88 micrograms of levothyroxine per 60 milligrams or 1 grain of desiccated thyroid. Then monitor thyroid levels closely every 4 to 6 weeks and adjust as needed. And of course, educate patients to reach out to their prescriber if they have any serious symptoms such as palpitations or heart rate changes, dizziness, or extreme lethargy. Before we wrap up hypothyroidism, let's keep in mind that you play a key role in preventing mix-ups with any patient on a thyroid medication. The wrong product or dose can cause swings in thyroid levels, leading to changes in weight, sleep, mood, etc. Familiarize yourself with the different options and watch dosing units closely. Look for most hypothyroid med doses to be in micrograms, but watch for prescriptions ordered in milligrams. Mixing up can lead to dosing errors. Or prescribers may order desiccated thyroid in grains or milligrams. Remember that there are about 60 milligrams of desiccated thyroid per grain. Also, double check doses when entering prescriptions. For instance, there are 15 strengths of the brand Tiracent, 12 of Synthroid, and 8 of Armour Thyroid. Separate different strengths on pharmacy shelves with bins, shelf tags, etc., to prevent filling prescriptions with the wrong dose. And ensure the patient is aware of any change in brand, medication, product, generic, or strength, and that they receive pharmacist counseling. Since we really didn't have time to dig into interactions with levothyroxine today, check out our resource, Levothyroxine Absorption, the Effect of Food and Drugs, to learn about strategies to help patients handle some important food and drug interactions.
Thanks for listening. We hope today's episode gave you practical insights you can use right away. Now that you've listened, pharmacists and pharmacy technicians can receive CE credit. Just log into your pharmacist letter or pharmacy technician's letter account and look for the title of this podcast in the list of available CE courses. We've linked the resources we mentioned and more on today's topic right in the show notes. Those links will take you straight to our websites where you'll find even more concise, evidence-based charts, articles, and tools. If you're not yet a subscriber, now's the time. Sign up today to stay ahead with trusted, unbiased insights and continuing education. Listeners save 10% on a new or upgraded subscription. Just use code CC1026 at checkout. Looking for more? Check out our other TRC podcasts like Medication Talk and Rumor vs. Truth, or dive deeper with our full Pharmacy Essential Updates webinar series. Thanks for listening. Stay sharp, stay current, and join us next time on Clinical Capsules.